Sarah Reynolds had been hiking the outskirts of Cedar Creek when she noticed the abandoned Townsend property, its weathered farmhouse standing like a sentinel against the gray Missouri sky. The hiking trail curved away from the property, but something about the dilapidated structure with its boarded windows and sagging porch pulled at her a silent gravity she couldn't explain. 3 days later, as the winter storm warnings blared across local radio stations, Sarah returned to the property with Officer Parker after neighbors reported strange sounds coming from within. When they finally forced open the padlocked basement door, the beam of Sarah's flashlight cut through decades of darkness, revealing a skeletal German shepherd huddled in the corner, patches of fur missing from its ravaged body, ribs protruding like accusations, and when the dog raised its head and locked eyes with Sarah, what she saw in those amber depths made her blood run cold. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Cedar Creek. Missouri wasn't the kind of place people stumbled upon by accident. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, the town of 2,300 souls survived harsh winters and humid summers with the stoic resilience that defined the American Midwest. Main Street featured the essentials: a diner, hardware store, small grocery, and a tavern where farmers gathered to discuss weather patterns with the gravity of stockbrokers analyzing market trends. Sarah Reynolds hadn't chosen Cedar Creek so much as it had chosen her. After 8 years as a military K-9 handler, including 2 tours in Afghanistan, civilian life felt like an ill-fitting uniform. The 10-acre property with its century-old farmhouse and renovated barn offered the isolation her fractured mind craved. At 32, Sarah's athletic frame still moved with military precision, though the shadows beneath her blue eyes spoke of nights spent battling memories instead of sleep. The town knew her basics: former Army, lives alone, keeps to herself. What they didn't know was how she still woke, gasping for air, the echo of explosions and the memory of Duke, her German shepherd partner, lying motionless in the Afghan dust. They didn't see how she checked locks 3 times each night, or how she kept her military medals in a box she never opened. Dr. Jessica Miller was perhaps the closest thing Sarah had to a friend in Cedar Creek. The veterinarian with salt and pepper hair and perpetually cheerful scrubs volunteered alongside Sarah at the Veteran Rehabilitation Center outside town. "You need something living in that big house of yours," Jessica had told her countless times. Sarah always declined with a polite smile. Officer Brian Parker understood Sarah in ways others couldn't. The stocky policeman with 20 years on the force had served 2 different branch, different war, same ghosts. He respected her privacy and recognized the careful boundaries she maintained around her life. Her days followed a reliable pattern: dawn runs around her property, shifts at the rehabilitation center helping veterans learn new skills, evenings alone with books or documentaries. The routine anchored her. Each predictable hour, another small victory against the chaos that had defined her military service. She was healing slowly, deliberately, until that basement door swung open and everything changed. The first neighbor's call came into the sheriff's office on a Tuesday morning. Strange noises from the old Townsend place. The dispatcher noted. By Wednesday, 3 more residents had reported similar concerns: whimpering sounds. They said, like something in pain. Cedar Creek being what it was, rumors spread faster than the impending snowstorm, theories ranging from teenagers vandalizing the property to something more sinister. Sarah learned about the calls during her weekly coffee with Officer Parker at Maggie's diner. "Probably just the wind," Parker said, stirring his black coffee. "That old house has more creaks than my grandmother's knees, but I should check it out before this storm hits." Sarah set down her mug. "I was hiking near there on Sunday. Place looks like it hasn't been touched in years." Parker nodded. "Michael Townsend inherited it when his father died. Lives in Chicago now, some big finance job. Haven't seen him in Cedar Creek for at least 5 years. I'll go with you," Sarah offered, surprising herself. "I could use a break from the rehab center today." Parker studied her face, but didn't question her sudden interest. 2 hours later, they parked at the end of the overgrown driveway, 50 yards from the main house. The afternoon sky hung heavy with impending snow, casting premature shadows across the property. "County records show this place was built in 1902, Parker said as they approached. "The Townsend family owned it for 3 generations. The farmhouse loomed before them, its white paint long weathered to a patchy gray. Most windows were boarded up, and the front door secured with a rusted chain. They circled the property systematically, Sarah instinctively falling into the search pattern she'd used countless times in service. "Nothing unusual," Parker said after they'd examined the main floor through broken windows. "Probably just—" Sarah held up her hand, silencing him, her head tilted slightly, ears straining. 20 seconds passed before Parker started to speak again. "There," she whispered. "You hear that?" A faint whimper, barely perceptible, seemed to rise from beneath the house. Parker unclipped his flashlight and followed Sarah toward a cellar door partially hidden by overgrown shrubs. The padlock was new, incongruously shiny against the weathered wood. "This lock shouldn't be here if the place is abandoned," Sarah noted. Parker nodded grimly and radioed dispatch for permission to force entry based on suspected animal endangerment. Permission granted. He retrieved bolt cutters from his cruiser. The padlock gave way with a metallic snap that echoed across the empty yard. Sarah pulled the doors open, unleashing a wave of fetid air that made them both recoil. Parker's flashlight beam probed the darkness, revealing steep wooden steps descending into blackness. "Stay here," he instructed Sarah. "Protocol. With respect, Officer Parker. I've cleared buildings in Kandahar. I'll be fine." They descended together, flashlights scanning the concrete floor. The basement was surprisingly large, with several rusted support columns creating shadowed recesses throughout the space. The whimpering had stopped. "There," Sarah whispered, her beam catching a hint of movement in the farthest corner. What they found made Sarah's throat tighten with rage and sorrow. A German shepherd, little more than a skeleton covered with patchy fur, lay curled against the wall. Open sores covered its emaciated body, particularly along its back and hindquarters. The dog's eyes, sunken into its skull, blinked painfully against the sudden light. "Jesus Christ," Parker muttered, immediately calling for animal control. Sarah approached slowly, dropping to her knees 10 feet from the terrified animal. "Hey there," she whispered, keeping her voice soft and even. "We're here to help you." The dog pressed itself harder against the wall but didn't growl a bad sign. In Sarah's experience, healthy dogs defended themselves. This one had given up. "He's been here a while," Parker said, examining empty food cans and a filthy water bowl nearby. "Weeks, maybe months." Sarah's trained eye noticed more. "The injuries aren't just from neglect. See the pattern of those scars? Those are fighting wounds." Her voice hardened. "Someone was using this dog." Parker photographed everything while Sarah remained near the dog, talking softly. Animal control estimated an hour arrival time due to the approaching storm. "I'm taking him now," Sarah said, removing her jacket. "He needs immediate medical care." Parker didn't argue. With gentle movements, Sarah wrapped her jacket around the trembling animal and lifted him. The dog was terrifyingly light, and she could feel every rib and vertebra through the fabric. "I'm calling Dr. Miller," she said as they carefully ascended the stairs. "And then I want everything you have on the Townsend family." As she settled the German shepherd in her truck, Sarah felt something shift inside her, a door long closed, creaking open. The dog's amber eyes, though clouded with pain, watched her every move with an intelligence that pierced her carefully constructed defenses. "You're safe now," she promised, though she knew the road ahead would be anything but simple for either of them. 3 weeks had passed since that frigid afternoon in the Townsend basement. The German shepherd, whom Sarah had named Max, lay on a thick orthopedic bed near the wood stove in her living room. Dr. Miller's initial prognosis had been cautiously optimistic despite the catalog of horrors she'd documented: severe malnutrition, extensive dermatitis, hookworms, pressure sores, multiple old fractures that had healed improperly, and the telltale scarring around his face and neck that spoke of dogfighting. "He's young," Jessica had said after that first marathon examination. "Maybe 9 months old. That's in his favor." But Sarah... She'd hesitated, removing her glasses to rub tired eyes. "The psychological damage may be worse than the physical. Don't expect too much, too soon." Sarah understood trauma. She recognized the vacant stare, the flinching at sudden movements, the way Max backed himself into corners to keep watch on the entire room. Each day followed the same careful routine medications, specialized food in small portions, gentle cleaning of his wounds, and hours of simply sitting nearby, reading aloud in a soft, steady voice. On this particular morning, Sarah was changing Max's bedding when her fingers brushed something metallic embedded in the fur along his neck. Gently parting the matted hair, she uncovered what appeared to be a small metal tag. Unlike any standard pet identification she'd seen, the numbers and letters stamped into its surface triggered an immediate recognition. "Military," she whispered, fingers tracing the familiar format. Her mind flashed to Duke, her canine partner from Afghanistan. His identification tags had used the same convention. This wasn't civilian identification, it was a military asset tag. Sarah poured herself a cup of coffee and placed a call to Officer Parker. "Any progress on the Townsend investigation?" she asked when he answered. "Some," Parker replied. "Michael Townsend is flying in from Chicago tomorrow to deal with the property and speak with us. Claims he had no idea anyone was using the basement. Property's been vacant since his father died 5 years ago. What about the brother Tyler, Wright? Local troublemaker, drug charges, petty theft. Nobody's seen him around for months." After hanging up, Sarah spent hours researching military working dog programs, unearthing nothing that explained Max's tag. When Dr. Miller arrived for her bi-weekly checkup, Sarah showed her the discovery. "Could he be a washout from a training program?" Jessica suggested, examining the tag. "Sometimes dogs that don't make the cut get adopted out." "Not with their tags still embedded," Sarah countered. "And look at his age, he's too young to have completed training." Jessica's examination showed Max was healing physically, though still drastically underweight. "The skin infections are responding to treatment, but his back left leg, that old break, never set properly. He'll likely always have a limp." After Jessica left, Sarah sat beside Max's bed. "Where did you come from, boy?" she murmured. He watched her with those intelligent amber eyes, but maintained the careful distance he always kept. The next morning brought both snow flurries and a scheduled meeting with Michael Townsend at the sheriff's office. Sarah hadn't planned to attend until Parker called. "Thought you might want to be there," he said. "You found the dog, after all." Michael Townsend looked nothing like Sarah had imagined. Instead of the slick financial executive she'd pictured, she found herself facing a tall, lean man with tired eyes and premature gray at his temples. His handshake was firm, his demeanor respectful if reserved. "I'm deeply disturbed by what happened on my property," he stated after introductions. "I want to make it clear that I had no knowledge anyone was using the house, let alone keeping animals in such conditions." "When was the last time you visited the property, Mr. Townsend?" Sheriff Collins asked. "About 3 years ago. I came back to collect some family photographs after my divorce was finalized." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of genuine distress. "I should have sold the place, but it's been in our family for generations. I couldn't bring myself to let it go." "And your brother?" Parker asked. "Any idea where Tyler might be?" Something flickered across Michael's face, pain, perhaps, or resignation. "Tyler and I haven't spoken in 2 years. Our last conversation ended with me refusing to lend him money again. He struggles with substances." The interview continued for another 40 minutes. Michael answered questions about the property, agreed to a thorough inspection, and expressed concern about the injured dog. "I'd like to contribute to his medical expenses," he offered, looking directly at Sarah. "That's not necessary," she replied coldly. Michael nodded, accepting her response without argument. "Still, I feel responsible. If there's anything I can do—" Outside the station, Sarah was unlocking her truck when Michael approached. "Ms. Reynolds, I just wanted to say—" He paused, seemingly at a loss for words. "I'm truly sorry about what happened to that dog. Our father loved German shepherds. He would have been heartbroken to see one treated that way." Something in his sincerity gave Sarah pause. "Your father had German shepherds. My whole childhood. He trained them for—" Michael stopped abruptly. "He was good with them. May I ask how the dog is doing?" "Recovering. Slowly." Michael nodded and turned to leave, then hesitated. "I'm staying at Cedar Inn while I sort out the property situation. If you learn anything about who might have used our basement—" "I'll tell Officer Parker," Sarah finished firmly. That evening, Sarah pulled into her driveway to find a small moving truck parked at the neighboring property, a modest farmhouse a quarter-mile down the road that had been vacant for months. As she watched, a tall figure emerged from the house and waved in her direction. Even from this distance, she recognized Michael Townsend. Sarah sat frozen in her truck, watching as Michael returned to unloading boxes. The coincidence was too perfect, too calculated. Her new neighbor was the owner of the property where Max had been imprisoned and tortured, the man whose family history somehow connected to German shepherds with military tags. "What game are you playing?" she whispered, her instincts humming with warning. Inside her house, Max had managed to stand when she entered the first time he'd greeted her. His tail hung motionless, but his eyes tracked her movements with an intensity that communicated more than fear for once. Sarah knelt before him, carefully maintaining the distance he seemed to need. "Don't worry," she promised quietly. "I'm not letting anyone hurt you again." The January wind cut through Sarah's jacket as she walked the perimeter of her property, scanning the tree line with practiced vigilance. 2 months in Afghanistan's Helmand province had taught her the value of establishing observation points, and now she found herself mentally mapping sight lines between her farmhouse and Michael Townsend's newly occupied residence. Max watched from the living room window, his silhouette a dark sentinel against the glass. 4 weeks of proper nutrition and medical care had begun to fill out his skeletal frame, though he remained severely underweight. The patches of missing fur were slowly filling in, revealing a classic black and tan coat beneath the damage. Sarah's phone vibrated in her pocket. Jessica Miller. "Lab results came back," the veterinarian said without preamble. "The blood panel shows evidence of pharmaceutical-grade sedatives in his system, not street drugs. Someone had access to veterinary supplies." Sarah processed this information while watching a delivery truck turn into Michael Townsend's driveway. "What about the tag?" "That's even more interesting. I sent photos to a colleague who works with police K-9s in Kansas City. He says it's definitely military format, but the specific code doesn't match current inventory systems, meaning either it's very old or it's from a program that isn't in standard databases." Sarah thanked her and ended the call, her suspicions deepening. After checking that Max had fresh water, she drove to the Cedar Creek Sheriff's Office, where Parker was working the front desk. "Need to see those case photos again," she said without preamble. Parker raised an eyebrow but retrieved the file. Sarah spread the photographs across the desk, studying the basement where they'd found Max. In the harsh illumination of police flashlights, the concrete floor showed dark stains, empty food cans, and scattered debris. She pointed to the background of one image. "What's that?" Parker leaned closer. "Looks like a trapdoor. Did anyone check below it?" "Honestly, no. We were focused on the dog, and there was no indication of a sub-basement on the property records." An hour later, they stood in the Townsend basement once more, the musty air still heavy with neglect. Sarah knelt beside the metal ring embedded in the concrete floor, pulling upward with gloved hands. The trapdoor resisted, then yielded with a groan of protesting hinges. Parker's flashlight illuminated a small storage space, perhaps 5 feet square. The beam caught the gleam of metal containers and what appeared to be veterinary supplies. "Get evidence down here," Sarah said quietly. The cache revealed prescription sedatives, antibiotics, rudimentary surgical tools, and most disturbing 4 sets of canine remains buried in shallow depressions against the far wall. "This wasn't random animal cruelty," Sarah said as the evidence team photographed the scene. "This was systematic." Parker nodded grimly. "And recent. Those medications haven't been down here long enough to degrade in this environment." That evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table surrounded by printouts, research on dogfighting operations, black market trafficking of trained dogs, and military working dog programs. Max lay nearby, close enough to observe but maintaining the careful buffer zone he always kept between himself and humans. "What happened to you?" she murmured, glancing at the dog. "And why does Michael Townsend suddenly want to live next door to the person who found you?" The night brought fitful sleep, punctuated by dreams of Duke. In the most vivid sequence, her canine partner sat at attention beside a younger German shepherd with familiar amber eyes. Sarah woke at 3 a.m., sweating despite the winter chill that permeated her bedroom. Downstairs, she found Max standing alert at the front window, a low growl vibrating in his chest, the first vocal sound she'd heard him make. Sarah moved carefully to his side and peered into the darkness. Headlights swept across her property as a vehicle turned from the main road, heading toward the Townsend place. The morning brought heavy snow, transforming Cedar Creek into a postcard-perfect winter scene. Sarah cleared her driveway, watching as Michael did the same a quarter-mile away. His meticulous, methodical movements reminded her of military precision. Her cell phone rang. "Officer Parker. We ran those meds found in the basement. They were reported stolen from Cedar Creek Animal Hospital 6 months ago." Sarah frowned. "Jessica's clinic." "No, the other one out on County Road 8. Dr. Whitaker's place." "Who reported the theft?" "That's the thing. The report was filed by a temp receptionist. Whitaker was on vacation." The pieces weren't fitting together properly, creating a mosaic with disturbing gaps. Sarah decided to approach from another angle. Dr. Miller arrived that afternoon for Max's checkup, settling cross-legged on the floor several feet from the German shepherd. "He's gaining weight nicely," she observed, making notes. "How's his behavior?" "Still keeps his distance. Doesn't bark, never plays. But he growled last night, first time I've heard him make a sound." Jessica nodded. "Progress." "Slow but real." She hesitated, then added, "I brought someone to meet you both." A sharp knock at the front door made Max retreat to his corner. Sarah opened it to find a tall man with close-cropped gray hair and the unmistakable bearing of military. "Captain James Mercer." He introduced himself with a firm handshake. "Dr. Miller thought I might be able to help with your shepherd." Inside, Captain Mercer observed Max carefully from a distance. "Military working dog for sure," he confirmed. The stance, The watchfulness, even injured. He carries himself like he's on duty. But he's too young to have completed training, Sarah countered. Agreed. My guess, he was bred for the program but diverted somewhere in the pipeline. Mercer's expression darkened. It happens. Dogs with the right genetics are valuable, especially ones with proven bloodlines. Sarah described the tag, showing Mercer the photographs. That's old format, he said immediately. We haven't used that classification system in nearly a decade, but if I had to guess, this dog comes from breeding stock for specialized units. After Mercer left, Sarah drove into town, her mind churning with new questions. At the county records office, she requested information on the Townsend family history. Harold Townsend, she read from the file. Father to Michael and Tyler. Occupation listed as government contractor from 1985 until his death in 2018. The file contained little else of note: property records, tax assessments, building permits for a large outbuilding constructed in 1990, now demolished. Sarah's next stop was Cedar Creek Library, where the local history section housed decades of town newspapers. She scanned microfiche records from the late 1980s through the early 2000s, searching for mentions of Harold Townsend. 3 hours later, she found what she was looking for: a small article from 1992. Local businessman Harold Townsend recognized for contributions to military canine program. Townsend's breeding facility has produced over 20 dogs, now serving with distinction in military operations worldwide. The afternoon was fading into evening when Sarah finally drove home, snow beginning to fall again in thick, lazy flakes. As she turned into her driveway, her headlights swept across a figure standing at the edge of her property. Michael Townsend, seemingly waiting for her return. Sarah parked and stepped out, hand instinctively moving toward her hip where a service weapon had once been holstered. Ms. Reynolds, Michael called, remaining where he stood. I was hoping we could talk. About what? I think you know. Snow gathered on his dark coat as he stood perfectly still. You've been asking questions about my father. Sarah maintained her distance. Your father bred military dogs. Michael nodded once. For 20 years. It was his life's work. And now someone's using your property to abuse a dog with military tags. Quite a coincidence. Not a coincidence at all. Michael's voice remained steady. That's why I'm here. When I heard about the German Shepherd, I knew it had to be connected to my father's work. That's why I moved back to find out who's dishonoring his legacy. Sarah studied his face for deception, but found only intensity and what appeared to be genuine concern. Why should I believe you? Because I can help you understand what happened to that dog, and I think you know more than you're telling the sheriff's department. The standoff lasted several seconds before Sarah relented. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. We can talk then. Inside, Max had positioned himself by the front door, his posture alert despite his weakened condition. Sarah knelt several feet away, respecting the invisible boundary he maintained. What's your story, boy? She whispered. For the first time since his rescue, Max deliberately moved toward her, closing the distance by several inches. His amber eyes held hers with an intelligence that transcended his trauma. The following morning dawned clear and bitterly cold. Sarah had just finished feeding Max when her phone rang. Jessica Miller. I need you to bring Max in immediately, the veterinarian said, her tone urgent. Those new blood tests show something concerning. At the clinic, Jessica ushered them directly into an examination room. His liver values are dangerously elevated, she explained, showing Sarah the results. And I found traces of a substance used in performance enhancement for fighting dogs. It damages organs over time, but it's almost impossible to detect unless you know what you're looking for. How did you know to test for it? Jessica's expression tightened. Because 3 other dogs have been brought in with similar symptoms in the past year. All strays found in the county, all dead within weeks. Sarah looked at Max, who sat stoically as Jessica drew more blood. What's his prognosis? Without knowing exactly what he was given or for how long. Jessica shook her head. We need to consult a specialist. I've called Dr. Thomas Reed in Kansas City, but with this snowstorm coming, I don't know when he can get here. The weathered clock on the wall showed 9:45 a.m. Sarah weighed her options, then made a decision. I need to meet someone. Can Max stay here for an hour? Jessica nodded. Of course. But Sarah, whoever did this to him, is still out there, possibly doing it to other dogs. I know. That's what this meeting is about. Sarah arrived at her farmhouse to find Michael Townsend's truck already in the driveway. He stood on her porch, hands thrust deep in his coat pockets against the cold. Thank you for agreeing to talk, he said as she approached. Inside, Sarah made coffee while Michael removed his coat, revealing a lean frame in a simple flannel shirt and jeans, no hint of his Chicago executive life. My father started breeding German Shepherds in the late 80s. He began once they were seated at the kitchen table. He had military contacts from his time in the Army, and what started as a hobby became a government contract. He provided dogs with specific traits: intelligence, drive, physical capabilities. Where were these dogs bred and trained? Here. Originally, when the operation expanded, he built a larger facility on the property, the outbuilding that was torn down after his death. Michael stared into his coffee. My childhood was filled with German Shepherds. I helped socialize the puppies, learned to care for them. But you didn't follow in his footsteps. No. I left for college and never came back, except for brief visits. My father understood he wanted more for us than this town could offer. And Tyler, Michael's expression darkened. Tyler was different. He loved the dogs, but there was always something off about how he interacted with them. Too controlling, too focused on dominance. When he was 16, my father caught him mistreating one of the puppies and banned him from the breeding program. When did your father's contract end? Officially, 2010. But he maintained connections, continued breeding on a smaller scale until his health declined around 2015. Sarah studied Michael's face. The dog we found, Max, has a military tag with an old format. Michael nodded. When I heard that, I knew he must have come from one of my father's bloodlines. The question is how he ended up in our basement. And who's responsible? He leaned forward. What else did you find there? Sarah described the hidden storage area and its contents. Michael paled visibly. Dogfighting, he said quietly. Tyler was involved with that crowd in his teens. Dad intervened, got him straightened out, or so we thought. You think your brother is behind this? I don't want to believe it, but... Michael ran a hand through his hair. Tyler disappeared around 6 months ago. Said he was going to rehab in Illinois, but when I called to check on him, they had no record of him. Sarah's phone rang Jessica Miller again. I just got a call from the sheriff's office, the veterinarian said, her voice tight with urgency. Someone broke into the clinic 15 minutes ago. They tranquilized my assistant and took Max. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Any security footage? Yes, it was Tyler Townsend. Sarah lowered the phone, finding Michael watching her with concern. What is it? Your brother just kidnapped Max from the veterinary clinic. Michael stood abruptly. We need to find him now. I think I know where he might go. As they rushed to Sarah's truck, heavy snow began to fall, the first wave of the massive winter storm that had been forecasted. The radio warned of dangerous conditions developing, with 18 inches expected over the next 24 hours. Sarah gripped the steering wheel as they headed toward the rural outskirts of the county. Max was still weak, still recovering, and now in the hands of the man who had tortured him. The same man who, according to the evidence mounting against him, might be running an operation that had already killed multiple dogs. "If he hurts that dog," Sarah said through clenched teeth, "I don't care that he's your brother." Michael stared grimly ahead at the thickening snow. "If he's doing what we think he's doing, he's not the brother I knew anymore." The storm intensified with each passing mile, snow accumulating on the rural roads faster than county plows could clear it. Sarah drove with the focused intensity she'd honed during military convoys, her truck pushing through deepening drifts as Michael directed her toward an abandoned hunting cabin 10 miles outside town. "Our grandfather built it in the 1960s, Michael explained, gripping the dashboard as the truck fishtailed slightly on a curve. "Tyler and I spent summers there as kids. After Grandpa died, it just sat empty. I'd forgotten about it until last week when I checked my father's safe deposit box. There was a property tax bill. Tyler somehow got the deed transferred to his name 3 years ago." Sarah's jaw tightened. "And you didn't think to mention this to the sheriff?" "I didn't connect it to Max until now. The place has no electricity, no running water. I couldn't imagine anyone using it in winter." They turned onto a narrow Forest Service road, the truck's headlights illuminating a corridor of snow-laden pines. A mile in, Michael motioned for her to stop. "We should go on foot from here. There's a ridge ahead that overlooks the cabin. If Tyler's there, he'll hear the engine." Sarah reached under her seat and retrieved a tactical flashlight and hunting knife. Her military training surged to the forefront as she assessed their situation, nightfall approaching, blizzard conditions, unknown hostile potentially armed, and an injured animal to recover. "Stay behind me," she instructed. "If I tell you to get down or run, don't argue." They moved through the forest in silence, the snow muffling their footsteps. Sarah maintained a steady pace, scanning their surroundings with practiced efficiency. After 20 minutes of hiking, Michael touched her arm and pointed to a clearing ahead. The cabin was small and weathered, barely visible through the falling snow. A battered pickup truck was parked outside, fresh tracks leading to the door. More concerning was the generator humming at the side of the structure and the flicker of light visible through dirty windows. "That's Tyler's truck," Michael whispered. Sarah motioned for Michael to follow her to a rocky outcrop that provided both cover and a view of the cabin's front entrance. From this position, she could make out movement inside a figure passing in front of the windows. "I need to get closer," she said. "Stay here and call Parker. Tell him exactly where we are, but make it clear this might be a dog-fighting operation. That should get priority response even in this weather." "I'm coming with you," Michael insisted. "Your brother might be dangerous. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is." His expression hardened with resolve. "Tyler is my responsibility. And if he's hurting dogs bred from my father's bloodlines, that's doubly my problem to fix." Sarah recognized the determination in his eyes, the same look she'd seen in fellow soldiers who wouldn't be dissuaded. She handed him her spare flashlight. "Fine, but you follow my lead." They circled the cabin, approaching from the rear where shadows were deepest. A shed stood 20 yards from the main structure, its door secured with a padlock. Sarah made note of it before continuing to the cabin's back window. Rising slowly to peer inside, she observed a scene that confirmed their worst suspicions. The cabin's interior had been converted into a rudimentary dogfighting training facility. A makeshift ring occupied the center of the main room, constructed of plywood barriers. Various training equipment lined the walls: treadmills, weight-pulling harnesses, and chemical supplies. Tyler Townsend paced the room, phone pressed to his ear, gesticulating angrily. Max was visible in the corner, confined in a steel crate too small for his frame. Even from this distance, Sarah could see the dog was distressed, panting heavily despite the cold. "Oh, don't care about the weather," Tyler was saying, his voice audible through the thin glass. People are counting on this demonstration. The buyers won't wait. Yeah, I know he's not in prime condition, but the bloodline speaks for itself. The military genetics make all the difference. Sarah pulled back, processing what she'd heard. Tyler wasn't just abusing dogs, he was selling them, marketing Max's military breeding as a fighting advantage. "We need to get Max out now," she whispered to Michael. "Your brother's planning to use him in some kind of demonstration, maybe tonight." Michael's face had gone pale. "How do you want to handle this?" Sarah assessed their options. The storm would delay police backup indefinitely. Tyler was alone but potentially armed, and Max needed immediate medical attention. "I'll create a distraction at the front. You circle around to the back door, get inside, and secure Max. Don't confront Tyler, just get the dog out." "And then what?" "Get to the truck and leave. Don't wait for me." Michael started to protest, but Sarah cut him off. "Max is the priority. He needs medical attention immediately." She checked her watch. "Move in 5 minutes. Not before." Sarah circled to the front of the cabin, her mind cycling through tactical scenarios. She'd left her phone with Michael to coordinate with Parker, keeping her hands free. The knife was a last resort she needed to neutralize Tyler without endangering Max further. From her pack, she removed a roadside emergency flare. It wouldn't last long in the snow, but it would create the diversion she needed. Sarah positioned herself behind Tyler's truck, struck the flare, and tossed it onto the cabin's porch. The sudden flare of crimson light illuminated the clearing like a miniature sun. Inside, she heard Tyler curse loudly. Moments later, the front door flew open, and Tyler emerged, baseball bat in hand. "Who's out there?" he shouted into the swirling snow. Sarah remained hidden, watching as Tyler descended the steps, scanning the tree line. When he moved toward the source of the light, she slipped around the side of the cabin. Through the window, she saw Michael enter through the rear door and move toward Max's crate. The plan was working until a second figure emerged from the shadows inside the cabin. Sarah's heart sank. Tyler wasn't alone after all. Michael had just reached Max's crate when the second man confronted him. From her position, Sarah could see the confrontation escalating rapidly. There was no time for subtlety now. She sprinted to the front door and burst inside, immediately assessing the situation. Michael stood protectively in front of Max's crate, facing a large man with a shaved head who was advancing on him. Neither had noticed Sarah's entrance. "Back away from him," Sarah commanded, her voice cutting through the tension. Both men turned. The stranger reached for his waistband, but Sarah was faster. She crossed the room in 3 strides and drove her shoulder into his midsection, using his momentum to slam him against the wall. He crumpled, momentarily stunned. "Get Max out now!" she shouted to Michael, who was already working on the crate's latch. The cabin door banged open again as Tyler returned, his expression transforming from confusion to rage when he saw Sarah. "You," he snarled, raising the baseball bat. "I knew someone was watching the basement. Should have dealt with you then." "It's over, Tyler," Sarah replied, positioning herself between him and Michael. "The police know about your operation. They're on their way." Tyler laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "In this storm, we'll be long gone before they get here." He gestured to the fallen man. "Get up. Vince, deal with her." The shaved-headed man struggled to his feet, pulling a hunting knife from his boot. Behind Sarah, she heard the crate door open and Michael's gentle voice urging Max out. "Sarah, he's too weak to move quickly," Michael called. The situation was deteriorating. 2 armed opponents, an injured dog who couldn't flee, and backup delayed by the blizzard. Sarah's military training kicked in. Fully assess, adapt, act. "Stay down," she ordered as Vince lunged forward. Sarah sidestepped, using his momentum against him, but the confined space limited her options. The knife caught her sleeve, tearing fabric but missing flesh. She responded with a precise strike to his wrist, forcing him to drop the weapon. Tyler used the distraction to circle around, trying to reach Michael and Max. Sarah pivoted, catching Tyler's bat mid-swing with both hands. The impact sent shock waves up her arms, but she held firm, locking eyes with him. "You don't want to do this, Tyler," she warned. "You have no idea what I want," he spat back, trying to wrench the bat from her grip. For an instant, Sarah saw beyond his rage to something else: desperation, addiction, a life spiraled far from its intended path. Then Vince was on her again, grabbing her from behind. In the chaotic seconds that followed, several things happened simultaneously. Sarah broke Vince's hold using techniques honed through years of combat training. Tyler advanced on Michael, who stood protectively in front of Max. And from the corner, a sound cut through the chaos, a deep, commanding bark. Max had risen to his full height, emaciated body quivering with the effort. His hackles were raised. Teeth bared in a defensive posture Sarah recognized immediately from her military days. Despite his weakened state, the German shepherd had positioned himself between Michael and the threat, summoning whatever strength remained to protect his rescuer. The display gave Tyler pause. In that moment of hesitation, Sarah struck, delivering a precisely targeted blow that sent him staggering backward. She followed with a sweep that took his legs out from under him. The bat clattered to the floor. "Michael," she called, never taking her eyes off Tyler and Vince. "Get Max out now." Michael hesitated. "I can't leave you with them." "Go," Sarah insisted, retrieving Tyler's bat and holding it with practiced confidence. "I can handle this." Michael finally relented, gently guiding Max toward the door. The dog moved with difficulty but kept his body between Michael and the downed men, a soldier's instinct evident despite his condition. As Michael and Max disappeared into the snowstorm, Vince made one final attempt, charging Sarah with reckless abandon. She sidestepped efficiently, using his momentum to send him crashing into a collection of chemical supplies. Glass containers shattered, filling the air with acrid fumes. "Stay down," she warned both men, "or the next one won't be so gentle." Tyler glared up at her from the floor, blood trickling from his nose. "You have no idea what you've done. That dog is worth $50,000 to the right buyer. Military genetics, perfect fighting temperament. That dog is a victim of abuse who deserves better than being exploited for your profit." Sarah backed toward the door, keeping both men in view. "And from what I heard, you've been doing this with other dogs, too." "Business is business," Tyler spat. "My father wasted those bloodlines on the military. I'm just finding a more profitable market." The confession ignited a cold fury in Sarah. This wasn't just animal cruelty, it was a systematic operation to corrupt the very dogs bred to serve and protect. Outside, the sound of engines cut through the howling wind. Headlights swept across the cabin windows as multiple vehicles approached. Officer Parker had managed to get through despite the storm. Sarah maintained her position until the first officers entered, weapons drawn. Only then did she lower the bat, adrenaline giving way to a bone-deep weariness. "Two suspects," she reported to Parker as he secured Tyler. "Dogfighting operation, evidence of illegal substances, animal cruelty, theft of military assets." Parker nodded, taking in the makeshift fighting ring and training equipment. "Where's the dog?" "Michael Townsend took him to safety. He needs immediate medical attention." As additional officers secured the scene, Sarah stepped outside into the swirling snow. The storm had intensified, visibility reduced to mere feet. Her truck was gone. Michael had followed her instructions to escape with Max. Parker joined her on the porch. "Backup's nearly here. We'll need your statement, but it can wait until we get everyone safely to town." Sarah nodded, suddenly aware of the knife cut on her arm starting to sting. As officers led Tyler and Vince to patrol cars, Tyler locked eyes with her one final time. "You think you've won?" he called through the snow. "That dog will never be normal. Some damage can't be undone." Sarah watched as he was placed in the back of a cruiser, his words hanging in the frigid air. She knew all too well about damage that couldn't be undone. She lived with it every day in her memories of Afghanistan, in the nightmares that still woke her screaming. But she also knew about healing, about rebuilding, about finding purpose after trauma. "We'll see about that," she murmured, as the convoy prepared to navigate the treacherous road back to Cedar Creek, where Michael and Max were waiting. The storm that had begun during the cabin confrontation evolved into the worst blizzard Cedar Creek had seen in decades. Main Street disappeared beneath 4 feet of snow. Power lines collapsed under the weight of ice, and the county declared a state of emergency by midnight. Sarah had barely made it back to town in Officer Parker's cruiser, the journey taking over 2 hours through near whiteout conditions. Dr. Miller's clinic operated on generator power, the warm glow of emergency lights visible from the street as Parker dropped Sarah at the entrance. Inside, she found Michael sitting on the floor outside an examination room, his head in his hands. "How is he?" Sarah asked, her voice rough with exhaustion. Michael looked up, his face haggard. "Not good. The stress of being moved again, the cold. Jessica's doing everything she can." Sarah slid down the wall to sit beside him, the adrenaline crash leaving her limbs leaden. The cut on her arm had been hastily bandaged at the sheriff's station, but it throbbed in time with her heartbeat. "Tyler and his associate are in custody," she said quietly. "Multiple charges: animal cruelty, illegal dogfighting, possession of stolen property, assault. They found evidence of other dogs, documentation of sales." Michael nodded without looking up. "I keep thinking about my father. He dedicated his life to breeding dogs that would serve, protect. And Tyler took that legacy and twisted it into—" His voice broke. "I should have known, should have checked on the property more often, should have seen what my brother was becoming." Before Sarah could respond, the examination room door opened. Dr. Miller emerged, surgical mask pulled down around her neck, exhaustion evident in the slump of her shoulders. "He's stabilized," she reported, "but the next 24 hours are critical. The combination of his existing conditions with the stress and cold exposure has put tremendous strain on his system. His liver is showing signs of failure from whatever drugs Tyler was giving him." "Can I see him?" Sarah asked. Jessica nodded. "Briefly. He's sedated, but—" She hesitated. "There's something else you should see." Inside, Max lay on a treatment table, IV lines running into his foreleg, an oxygen tube assisting his labored breathing. His already thin body seemed to have collapsed further, as if the brief show of strength at the cabin had depleted his final reserves. Dr. Miller gently turned Max's ear, revealing a tattoo that had been hidden by infection and matted fur. "I found this when I was cleaning him up. It's a military designation specifically from the breeding program that supplied dogs to specialized units." Sarah traced the faded mark with trembling fingers. "Just like Duke's," she whispered. "There's more," Jessica continued, lifting a portable ultrasound screen. "I did a complete scan to check for internal injuries. That's when I found this." The screen showed a small, rectangular object embedded deep in Max's shoulder muscle. "A microchip?" Sarah asked. "More sophisticated." "Military-grade tracking implant, according to Captain Mercer, when I described it. He confirmed it's the type used for high-value canine assets. The program was discontinued years ago, but my father had access to the technology," Michael finished from the doorway. He mentioned at once special projects for elite units. Dr. Miller nodded. I've contacted specialists at the University Veterinary Hospital. They want to transfer Max there as soon as the roads are passable. They have equipment to safely remove the implant and better facilities for liver failure treatment. Sarah leaned close to Max, her hand hovering inches above his sleeping form. "Hold on," she whispered. "Just hold on a little longer." The clinic became their shelter as the blizzard raged through the night. Parker brought news that Cedar Creek had been effectively cut off from neighboring counties, with highway crews estimating 36 hours before main roads would be cleared. The university hospital sent protocols for stabilizing Max, which Dr. Miller implemented with meticulous care. Sarah dozed fitfully in a waiting room chair, waking every hour to check on Max. Shortly before dawn, she found Michael at the dog's side, speaking softly as he monitored an IV drip. "My father would talk to them like this," he explained without looking up. "He said dogs understand more than we think, not just commands, but intentions, emotions." Sarah observed Michael's gentle movements, so at odds with his brother's cruelty. "You helped with the dogs growing up." "Until I left for college. Finance was my rebellion, I suppose. Suits and spreadsheets instead of kennels and training fields." A faint smile crossed his lips. "But I learned a lot before I left. How to read their body language, recognize their needs." "Why'd you really come back to Cedar Creek, Michael?" He was quiet for a long moment. "My father's collection of breeding records and training manuals disappeared after his death. Tyler claimed to know nothing about it. When I heard about a German Shepherd found in our basement, one with military connections, I knew it had to be related." Around 9 that morning, Max's condition deteriorated rapidly. His breathing became increasingly labored. His gums took on a yellowish tint, and his temperature dropped despite the warming blankets. "His liver is failing, Doctor," Miller said grimly as she examined the latest blood test results. "We need those specialized medications from the university hospital." Parker arrived with news that the highway department had prioritized clearing a route to the hospital, but it would still be hours before passage was possible. "They've got a helicopter on standby for medical emergencies, but this storm has grounded all flights." Sarah paced the small treatment room, watching Max fight for each breath. The German Shepherd who had summoned his remaining strength to protect Michael was now losing his battle against the damage inflicted by months of abuse. Tyler's words echoed in her mind. "Some damage can't be undone. There has to be something more we can do," she insisted. "Doctor," Miller shook her head. "The treatments he needs aren't available in Cedar Creek. Without them—" The implication hung in the air, a weight pressing down on Sarah's chest. She thought of Duke, dying in the Afghan dust, while she screamed for a medevac that never came. The same helplessness threatened to overwhelm her now. Michael stepped forward. "What about Dr. Whitaker? Doesn't he stock specialty medications at his clinic?" "Whitaker closed his practice 2 weeks ago," Jessica replied. "Moved to Florida without notice." "But his clinic is still there," Michael pressed, "with all its supplies." Parker frowned. "That would be breaking and entering, even in an emergency." "Not if we had permission from the property owner," Michael countered. "I happen to know that the building is owned by Cedar Creek Development Corporation. My development corporation—" Sarah looked at him sharply. "You own Whitaker's clinic. I've been quietly buying commercial properties in town as investments. The deal closed last month." Michael turned to Parker. "As the legal owner, I'm authorizing emergency access to any supplies that might save this dog's life." Parker considered this, then nodded reluctantly. "I'll accompany you to make it official." Dr. Miller quickly compiled a list of medications they needed. "Even if we find them, this is a desperate measure. Without proper hospital facilities—" "We have to try," Sarah insisted. 30 minutes later, Sarah, Michael, and Parker fought their way through snowdrifts to Whitaker's abandoned clinic. The building stood dark and silent on the edge of town, its parking lot an unbroken field of white. Inside, they found evidence that Whitaker's departure had been hasty. Patient files remained in cabinets, equipment stood uncovered, and the pharmacy door hung partially open. As Dr. Miller had feared, most specialty medications were missing. "Looks like someone cleaned out the controlled substances," Parker observed, examining the empty safe. Sarah methodically searched cabinets and drawers, desperation mounting with each empty shelf. In a back storage room, she finally discovered a sealed emergency kit labeled Hepatic Support Protocol. "Could this help?" she called. Parker brought the kit to her, checking the unbroken seal. "It's still intact. We should document that before taking it." As he photographed the kit and its contents, Sarah noticed a file cabinet partially hidden behind storage boxes. Something about its placement tucked away, yet accessible, triggered her investigator's instinct. The top drawer contained standard veterinary forms, but the bottom drawer was locked. "Parker, could I borrow your multi-tool?" 2 minutes of careful manipulation opened the drawer, revealing a hidden compartment containing a laptop, external hard drive, and a stack of breeding records in protective sleeves. "Michael," Sarah called, "I think these are your father's missing records." Michael knelt beside her, carefully examining the documents. "These are his. I recognize his handwriting, his coding system." He looked up, confusion evident. "Why would Whitaker have them?" Parker bagged the items as evidence. "We'll figure that out later. Right now, we need to get this medication back to Miller." The return journey through the storm seemed to take an eternity. Sarah clutched the medical kit against her chest, protecting it from the snow as they navigated the treacherous streets. Her mind raced with questions about Whitaker's connection to Harold Townsend's records and Tyler's dogfighting operation, but those mysteries would have to wait. When they finally reached the clinic, they found Dr. Miller performing manual respiration on Max, his condition having deteriorated to critical during their absence. "His system is shutting down," she said, quickly examining the emergency kit's contents. "This might help stabilize his liver function, but he's so weak now." Sarah knelt beside the treatment table, her hand gently resting on Max's side, feeling each labored breath. The dog who had survived months of abuse and neglect, who had found the strength to stand protective and proud in that cabin, was slipping away despite their desperate efforts. "Please," she whispered, not sure who she was addressing, God, fate, or the wounded animal before her. "Please don't give up now, Doctor." Miller administered the medications with practiced efficiency, but her expression remained grave. "All we can do now is wait and see if his system responds. The next few hours will tell us everything." Outside, the blizzard continued unabated, cutting them off from the specialized care Max so desperately needed. Sarah settled on the floor beside his table, maintaining her vigil as darkness fell once more over Cedar Creek. "Some damage can't be undone," Tyler had said. "We'll see about that," Sarah murmured, her hand never leaving Max's side. "We'll see." Dawn broke on the third day of the blizzard, pale light filtering through frosted clinic windows. Sarah woke with a start, her neck stiff from sleeping upright against the wall. For a moment, disorientation clouded her mind, the antiseptic smell, the hum of medical equipment, the weight against her leg. She looked down to find Max's head resting against her thigh. The German shepherd's eyes were open, watching her with quiet awareness. His breathing, while still labored, had stabilized overnight. Sometime during her exhausted sleep, he had inched closer until making physical contact the first time he had voluntarily touched a human since his rescue. "Hey there," Sarah whispered, hardly daring to move. Max's tail thumped once against the floor, a weak gesture but unmistakable in its meaning. Dr. Miller found them this way when she came to check vitals. "Well now," she said softly, observing the tableau. "This is unexpected progress." The emergency medications had pulled Max back from the brink. His liver values, while still dangerously elevated, had stopped climbing. His temperature had stabilized. Most importantly, he had begun accepting small amounts of water and specialized nutrient paste. "He's fighting," Jessica confirmed after her examination. "The university hospital team has been consulting by phone, and they're cautiously optimistic. If we can maintain this stability for another 24 hours, his chances improve significantly." Officer Parker arrived mid-morning with news and coffee. "Highway crews have cleared Route 8. The hospital is sending an emergency transport vehicle with a veterinary team. Should be here by noon, weather permitting." He settled into a chair, warming his hands around his coffee cup. "We've been busy at the station. The evidence from Whitaker's clinic opened up a whole new angle to the investigation." Sarah listened as Parker outlined what they'd discovered. Dr. Whitaker hadn't simply left town, he'd fled. Bank records showed large, irregular cash deposits over the past 3 years. His computer contained encrypted files that, once accessed, revealed detailed records of dog sales to fighting operations across 3 states. "And here's where it gets interesting," Parker continued. "Whitaker was Harold Townsend's veterinarian. After Harold died, Whitaker apparently formed a partnership with Tyler. They used Harold's breeding records to identify and locate dogs with the specific bloodlines prized for fighting." "The military genetics," Sarah said, remembering Tyler's words at the cabin. Parker nodded. "Exactly. Dogs bred for strength, intelligence, and drive, but in the right hands, trained to serve and protect. In the wrong hands, exploited for profit." Michael finished from the doorway. He had gone home briefly to shower and change, but returned looking no less exhausted. "My father's life's work, perverted into this." Sarah looked down at Max, who remained close against her leg despite the conversation around him. "How did Max specifically end up with Tyler?" Michael sat heavily in a chair. "I've been thinking about that. The timing fits with when Tyler disappeared 6 months ago. He told me he was going to rehab, but instead he must have been setting up the operation at the cabin." He hesitated. "Parker, did you find any breeding records for recent litters in my father's files?" "Several. Most recent dated about 10 months ago." "That matches Max's age," Sarah noted. "He's approximately 9 months old. According to Dr. Miller's assessment, my father maintained relationships with former military handlers who adopted his retired dogs." Michael explained. He would occasionally arrange breeding between these retired military dogs, continuing the bloodlines even after his official contracts ended. A theory was forming in Sarah's mind. So Max might have been born to retired military working dogs, then stolen by Tyler and Whitaker for their operation. "Seems likely," Parker agreed. "The FBI has joined the investigation now. They've been tracking stolen military dogs for over a year. Apparently, there's a black market for dogs with proven military training bloodlines." Max stirred against Sarah's leg, a small whimper escaping as he shifted position. She instinctively placed her hand near him, not touching, but offering comfort if wanted. To her surprise, he pressed his head against her palm. "Look at that," Dr. Miller whispered, witnessing the interaction. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. This small gesture of trust from an animal who had every reason to fear humans represented a victory more significant than any medical improvement. The moment was interrupted by Parker's radio crackling with an update from the station. He listened intently, his expression darkening. "What is it?" Sarah asked when he clicked off. "FBI database came back with a DNA match on Max. He's registered in their system. Parker looked directly at Sarah. He's the offspring of a dog named Duke, retired from military service 4 years ago, and another military working dog named Sierra. The world seemed to tilt beneath Sarah. Duke, my Duke. The record shows Duke was retired to a handler named Sarah Reynolds after sustaining injuries in Afghanistan. Parker's voice softened. Your partner didn't just survive. Sarah, he went on to sire several litters, including Max's. Sarah's hand trembled against Max's fur. Duke hadn't died in that explosion as she'd been told after her own medevac. He had survived, been retired, and apparently given to a handler with her name, but she had never received him. Someone had intercepted the paperwork, claimed Duke using her identity. Whitaker, Michael said quietly. He had access to military veterinary records through my father. He would have known about Duke's retirement approvals. The pieces aligned with sickening clarity. Whitaker had claimed Duke using Sarah's identity, then used him in an unauthorized breeding program with Tyler. Max was Duke's son, not just a military-line dog, but the direct descendant of her former partner. That's why the tag format looked familiar, Sarah realized. It wasn't just any military format. It was Duke's exact coding series. As this revelation settled over the room, Dr. Miller's phone rang. The university transport team had reached the town limits and would arrive within 30 minutes. They needed to prepare Max for transfer. Professional activity temporarily displaced emotional processing as they gathered Max's medical records and prepared him for the journey. The German Shepherd appeared to sense the shift in energy, becoming more alert despite his weakness. When the transport team arrived, 2 veterinarians and a technician in a specially equipped vehicle, Max initially retreated from the strangers, pressing himself against Sarah's legs. It's okay, she assured him quietly. They're here to help you. The lead veterinarian, Dr. Thomas Reed, assessed Max's condition while reviewing Dr. Miller's notes. Remarkable work keeping him stable with limited resources, he commented. The specialized treatment we can provide should address the liver damage, but recovery will be a long road. How long will he need to stay at the hospital? Sarah asked. Minimum 2 weeks, possibly longer depending on how he responds. Dr. Reed glanced at her. You can visit once he's stabilized. Are you his owner? The question caught Sarah off guard. Legally, Max had no official owner. As evidence in an ongoing investigation, he was technically in state custody. Officer Parker stepped forward. Ms. Reynolds has been his caretaker since his rescue. She's also... He hesitated, meeting Sarah's eyes before continuing. She's also the rightful owner of Duke, Max's sire. There's documented fraud involving the transfer of ownership after Duke's military retirement. Dr. Reed nodded, making notes in Max's file. I understand. We'll list Ms. Reynolds as the authorized contact. As the transport team prepared to move Max to their vehicle, Sarah knelt beside him. You're going to get the help you need, she told him softly. I'll come see you as soon as they allow visitors. Max held her gaze, that same intelligence she'd recognized from the beginning shining in his amber eyes. When the team gently lifted his stretcher, he maintained eye contact with Sarah until he disappeared through the clinic doors. The following days brought a flurry of developments as Cedar Creek emerged from beneath the historic snowfall. The FBI expanded their investigation, uncovering a multi-state network of illegal dogfighting operations with connections to Tyler and Dr. Whitaker. 7 additional dogs with military bloodlines were recovered from properties linked to their operation. Whitaker himself was apprehended attempting to cross the Canadian border. Sarah spent hours with FBI investigators, providing detailed statements about Duke, her military service, and the events leading to Max's rescue. DNA confirmation officially established Max's lineage as Duke's offspring, and the fraudulent paperwork diverting Duke from Sarah was uncovered in Whitaker's files. The investigation has expanded significantly. Agent Monica Pearson explained during a briefing at the sheriff's office, "This isn't just about animal cruelty anymore. We're looking at fraud against the federal government, identity theft, interstate trafficking, and theft of military assets." "What about the other dogs in the fighting ring?" Sarah asked. "The ones you recovered?" "Most are being treated at various veterinary facilities based on their needs. Their futures will depend on their recovery and temperament assessments." "And Max?" Agent Pearson smiled slightly. "That's actually why I wanted to speak with you privately." She slid a folder across the table. "These are ownership transfer papers for Max. As Duke's rightful handler and the person responsible for Max's rescue, you have priority claim if you want it." Sarah stared at the documents, a storm of emotions flooding through her. "What about Duke? Is he—" "Alive but elderly. He's currently at a retired military working dog sanctuary in Virginia. His health is too fragile for relocation. But you're welcome to visit him." 5 days after the storm, Sarah was finally permitted to visit Max at the university hospital. The drive took nearly 2 hours through the snow-transformed landscape. Michael insisted on accompanying her, his practical knowledge of his father's breeding program proving valuable to the veterinary specialists. They found Max in a specialized recovery ward, his condition notably improved. The jaundice had faded from his gums, his eyes were brighter, and though still severely underweight, his stance had strengthened. Most remarkably, when Sarah entered the room, his tail wagged with unmistakable recognition. "Dr. Reed reviewed Max's progress with cautious optimism. "The liver damage appears to be reversing. Though not completely, he'll likely need medication long-term. The old fractures are beyond surgical correction. At this point, he'll always have some mobility limitations." "And behaviorally?" Sarah asked. "That's where we've seen the most surprising progress, despite his trauma history. He's showing remarkable resilience and adaptive capacity. The geneticist who reviewed his bloodline says it's consistent with the traits selected for in military working dogs, not just physical capabilities, but psychological resilience as well." As they prepared to leave, Max whined softly, eyes fixed on Sarah. "He remembers you," Dr. Reed observed. "That connection may be the most important factor in his recovery." On the drive back to Cedar Creek, Michael broke a long silence. "You're going to adopt him, aren't you?" Sarah watched the winter landscape pass outside her window. "He's Duke's son. It feels like coming full circle," Michael finished. "Like a second chance for both of you." Sarah nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Some damage can't be undone." Tyler had told her. Looking at Max's progress and feeling her own frozen heart beginning to thaw, she wondered if Tyler had been wrong about that, too. 6 months after the snowstorm, Cedar Creek basked in the golden warmth of early summer. Morning sunlight streamed across Sarah's farmhouse kitchen, where she sat reviewing final paperwork for Second Chance K9, the rehabilitation center she had established in her renovated barn. The forms represented the culmination of countless hours of planning, licensing applications, and coordination with veteran support organizations. "That should be the last of it," she told Max, who lay nearby on a cushioned bed. The German Shepherd's transformation over the past months had been remarkable. Though still leaner than standard for his breed, steady nutrition and specialized care had restored much of his physical health. His coat had grown in fully, rich black and tan gleaming with vitality. The only visible reminders of his ordeal were a slight limp from the improperly healed fractures and small patches of scar tissue where fur grew white instead of black. More profound was the change in his demeanor. The terrified, shut-down dog from the basement had gradually given way to an alert, engaged companion. Max would never be a typical pet. His military breeding and early trauma had shaped him differently, but he had found his purpose alongside Sarah. The sound of tires on gravel announced a visitor. Max rose smoothly and moved to the window, posture alert but relaxed. His tail wagged once, a signal Sarah had learned to interpret with precision. "Michael?" she asked. Max's second tail wag confirmed her guess. Over the months, the German Shepherd had developed a small repertoire of signals to identify regular visitors, a system that emerged naturally between dog and handler. Michael knocked briefly before entering, a habit from his many visits during Max's rehabilitation. He carried a cardboard box and wore the casual clothes that had replaced his executive wardrobe since he'd decided to remain in Cedar Creek permanently. "Final approval came through," he announced, setting the box on the kitchen table. "The foundation is officially recognized as a 501c3. Donations are already coming in." Sarah examined the official letter with satisfaction. The Harold Townsend Military Working Dog Foundation, created with Michael's inheritance and business acumen, would support her rehabilitation center and advance research into canine trauma recovery. "Your father would be proud," she said quietly. "I think so." Michael knelt to greet Max, who approached with the careful dignity that characterized his interactions. "The FBI called this morning. They've completed evaluation of the 7 other dogs recovered from Tyler's associates. 3 are candidates for our program." The Foundation and Rehabilitation Center represented their shared response to the tragedy uncovered during the investigation. While Tyler awaited trial on multiple federal charges, Michael had channeled his guilt and grief into positive action. Sarah provided the practical experience with traumatized military dogs, while Michael contributed business expertise and connections. "When do they arrive?" Sarah asked, already mentally preparing space in the renovated barn. "Next week. Agent Pearson will accompany them." Michael hesitated. "There's something else. The hearing for Tyler's plea deal is tomorrow." Sarah tensed. The legal proceedings had dragged on for months, complicated by jurisdictional issues and the expanding scope of the investigation. "Has he accepted the prosecutor's terms?" "Yes. 15 years federal time with no possibility of parole before 10 years served. Full cooperation identifying other participants in the dogfighting network. Restitution payments to fund rehabilitation for all recovered animals." "And you're still going to speak at the hearing?" Michael nodded, his expression troubled. "He's my brother. Sarah. What he did was monstrous, but—" He trailed off, then straightened his shoulders. "I need to be there, to acknowledge both the harm he caused and the possibility of redemption. That's what our work is about, isn't it? Believing damage isn't always permanent." Sarah couldn't argue with that philosophy. It formed the foundation of their entire program. Still, Tyler's case triggered complicated emotions for her. The investigation had revealed the full extent of his operation: over 30 dogs brutalized, many to their deaths, all to supply an underground fighting network valued in the millions. "I understand," she said finally. "Do you want me to come with you?" "I'd appreciate that. It's at 10 tomorrow morning." After Michael left, Sarah collected her keys and whistled softly for Max. "Time for therapy rounds, partner." Twice weekly, they visited the Cedar Creek Veterans Center where Sarah had once worked. Now they came as volunteers, Max serving as a therapeutic presence for veterans struggling with PTSD and other service-related challenges. His military lineage and his own trauma recovery created a unique connection with the men and women still fighting their private wars. At the center, Max moved with quiet confidence through the common area, approaching each veteran with careful attention. Sarah watched as he settled beside Frank Collins, an older Vietnam veteran who rarely spoke but would spend hours gently stroking Max's fur. "He's looking good," observed Dr. Elaine Ward, the center's director. "Hard to believe he's the same dog from those initial photos." "Some days I can hardly believe it myself," Sarah admitted. "And how about you, still having the nightmares?" Sarah appreciated Elaine's directness. In the months since Max's rescue, Sarah had finally begun addressing her own trauma, participating in therapy sessions alongside other veterans. Less frequently, and differently now. Sometimes Duke is in them, but he's alive. Not. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Elaine knew her history, knew how the revelation of Duke's survival and Max's lineage had reopened old wounds while simultaneously offering healing. "You're going to Virginia next month." Sarah nodded. 3 weeks. "The sanctuary says Duke's health has stabilized enough for visitors. That will be quite a reunion." "I'm trying not to have expectations," Sarah replied, watching Max gently nudge Frank's hand when the elderly veteran became lost in troubling memories. "Just being able to say goodbye properly will be enough." The following morning dawned clear and warm. Sarah dressed carefully in her one proper suit, navy blue, purchased for military court appearances years ago. Max sensed the day's significance, staying close as she prepared. Michael met them outside the county courthouse, his expression a complex mixture of determination and grief. The three proceeded together into the imposing brick building, drawing curious glances from staff and visitors. Max, wearing his service dog vest, walked perfectly at Sarah's side, his training evident in every precise movement. Tyler's hearing was held in a small courtroom, the proceedings less formal than a trial. When Tyler was brought in wearing orange prison scrubs, Sarah felt Max tense slightly beside her, the only outward indication of his recognition. Tyler looked diminished after 6 months in detention. The swaggering figure from the cabin had given way to a gaunt, pale man whose hands trembled slightly. When he spotted Michael in the gallery, a flicker of emotion crossed his face too quickly to interpret. The proceedings moved efficiently, legal terminology, formal statements, the judge's questions. When the time came for victim impact statements, Michael rose to approach the podium. Sarah placed a steadying hand on his arm as he passed. "Your Honor," Michael began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his face. "I'm here today in a unique position. Tyler Townsend is my brother, which makes me both connected to the perpetrator of these crimes and devastated by their nature." He spoke for nearly 10 minutes about their family legacy, their father's dedication to breeding dogs that served and protected, and the betrayal of that legacy. His voice broke only once, when describing finding Max in the basement. "The dog who suffered most directly from my brother's actions has shown remarkable capacity for healing and forgiveness," Michael concluded. "He works now with traumatized veterans, offering comfort despite his own scars. I believe this capacity for rehabilitation exists in humans too, even those who have committed terrible wrongs. I ask the court to accept this plea agreement, which balances justice for the victims with the possibility of redemption for my brother." When Tyler was permitted to speak, he rose with difficulty, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor. "I have no excuses," he began hoarsely. "Addiction took me to dark places, but the choices were mine. What began as a way to make quick money became something I couldn't control." He finally looked up, first at the judge, then briefly toward Michael. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to help undo some of the damage if I can." Outside the courthouse after the hearing, Sarah stood slightly apart as Michael spoke briefly with his brother before guards returned Tyler to detention. The exchange appeared tense but necessary, brothers navigating a broken relationship with no easy resolution. "He asked about Max," Michael said when he rejoined Sarah. "Wanted to know if he survived. What did you tell him?" "The truth. That Max not only survived but is helping others recover from their own traumas." Michael exhaled slowly. "I also told him that one day, when he's ready to truly face what he did, I'd bring pictures of the rehabilitation center and the foundation work." You really believe he can change? I have to believe it's possible. Michael looked at Max, who sat patiently watching the courthouse steps. Just like we have to believe these dogs can heal despite what humans have done to them. The summer passed in a rhythm of work and recovery. 3 new dogs joined the rehabilitation program: Ranger, Luna, and Cooper, each bearing physical and psychological scars from Tyler's network. Sarah developed customized training protocols based on Max's successful rehabilitation, while Dr. Miller provided specialized veterinary oversight. Community reaction evolved from initial skepticism to growing support. Local farmers donated supplies, retired carpenters volunteered to build adaptive equipment, and the town council approved zoning exceptions for the facility's expansion. Even Sheriff Collins, initially dubious about wasting resources on damaged dogs, became a regular visitor, often bringing his grandchildren to learn about responsible animal care. In late August, Sarah and Max made the journey to Virginia. The retired military working dog sanctuary occupied 50 acres of rolling countryside. Its facilities designed specifically for the needs of aging or injured canine veterans. Sarah's heart pounded as she was led to a quiet garden where Duke spent his days. The black and tan German shepherd who had once been her partner in war was now elderly and gray-muzzled, dozing in dappled shade. When the caretaker gently roused him and whispered Sarah's name, Duke's head lifted. For a moment, time collapsed. Despite the years and miles between them, despite the gray on his muzzle and the cloudiness in his eyes, Duke recognized her. His tail thumped against the ground, and a soft whine escaped his throat. Sarah knelt beside him, tears streaming freely. "Hey, partner," she whispered. "I'm sorry it took so long." Duke pressed his head against her hand with the same gesture Max often used, a genetic echo of connection. Behind her, Max watched attentively, maintaining a respectful distance from the older dog. The sanctuary staff, understanding the significance of the reunion, gave them privacy. Sarah spent hours simply sitting with Duke, speaking softly about the years between, gently stroking his aging body. When she finally introduced Max, the younger dog approached with unusual deference, lying down within Duke's reach, but not demanding attention. Duke sniffed Max thoroughly, recognition registering in his rheumy eyes. Father and son, separated by cruelty and circumstance, connected in a moment that transcended human understanding. "We'll visit again," Sarah promised Duke as their time concluded. "Now that I've found you, I won't lose you again." The sanctuary director met with Sarah before her departure. "Duke has good days and difficult ones," she explained. "His age and previous injuries mean he's comfortable here with our specialized care, but seeing you has brought him joy we haven't witnessed before." "I'd like to make regular visits," Sarah said, "and I want to establish a connection between your sanctuary and our rehabilitation center in Cedar Creek." Driving home with Max beside her, Sarah felt a sense of completion she hadn't experienced since before Afghanistan. The circle that had been violently broken years ago had somehow reformed into a new shape, different, bearing scars, but whole in its own way. At home. The rehabilitation center buzzed with activity. Michael had overseen the arrival of specialized equipment during her absence, and Dr. Miller was conducting assessments of the newest rescue, a young Belgian Malinois recovered from a fighting operation in Tennessee. That evening, as sunset painted the sky in brilliant orange and pink, Sarah sat on her porch steps with Max at her side. In the renovated barn, lights glowed warmly as volunteers completed evening care routines for their canine residents. From the neighboring property, Michael's home now came the sound of hammering as he finished a wheelchair ramp for the Malinois with mobility issues. "We did good, Max," she said softly, resting her hand on the German shepherd's back. Max leaned slightly against her side, a gesture of affection that had once seemed impossible from the terrified creature in the basement. His amber eyes, so like Duke's, regarded her with quiet intelligence before turning to scan the property ever the guardian, even in peace. From the deepest trauma had emerged purpose. From cruelty had risen compassion. The damaged military dog and the wounded soldier had found healing in their shared mission to help others like themselves. As darkness settled over Cedar Creek, stars appearing in the summer sky, Sarah knew with certainty that some damage could indeed be healed, some broken things remade stronger at their fractured places. The proof sat beside her, vigilant and at peace, finally home. Sometimes life wounds us deeply, leaving scars we believe will never heal. We understand this truth in our bones as we age, the losses that have shaped us, the regrets that visit in quiet moments, the connections broken by time or circumstance. Sarah and Max's journey reminds us that even in our darkest chapters, when hope seems foolish, redemption remains possible, like Max, who found the courage to trust again despite unimaginable cruelty. We too can discover unexpected healing in life's third act. Like Sarah, who thought her heart permanently frozen by trauma, we can find our capacity for compassion revived through serving others. Their story speaks to what we've learned through decades of living, that purpose heals more effectively than time alone. That connection severed can sometimes reform in beautiful new patterns, and that our deepest wounds often become the very places from which our greatest contributions flow. As we navigate our senior years, perhaps our most meaningful work isn't behind us, but ahead, using our scars to help others heal, building legacies of restoration rather than resignation. For in the end, it's not the absence of damage that defines a meaningful life, but what we choose to create from our broken places.